Hello, welcome from the Altadena Library District. My name is Mark. This is Star Wars class for May the 4th Be With You Day. We're going to take a look at the original movie and all kinds of interesting factoids and whatnot surrounding its production and pre-production and what it used to look like and what it eventually became. And we're going to look at the expanded universe and all the cool stuff that is Star Wars, which is kind of endless. So this is just a little tour, and hopefully you will hear some cool stuff today. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start real soon. Go to view, I'm going to present. So there's the logo for Altadena Library District. I was going to put it on my background, but it appeared in reverse. So there was obviously some bad Sith magic going on. So I thought I'd just leave this amazing Star Destroyer deck background for Zoom, which you can get via Lucasfilm. You can get all kinds of cool Zoom backgrounds from them. Marvel Comics does backgrounds, all kinds of people do backgrounds. But anyway, so here's our Altadena Libraries logo. We're in California, in Los Angeles, or outside of it, the foot of beautiful mountains. Come visit us if you're ever in the neighborhood. So, Altadena Library District Star Wars class, May the 4th, 2020. Hopefully this will be the first in a yearly series, so we'll see. And there's a little May the 4th Be With You logo. It used to be called Star Wars Day at one point, and then somebody figured out the pun, fourth and force, and the rest is history. So I think it's been that way for about 10 years. And the reason it's called May the 4th Be With You, if you don't know, is that on May the 4th, 1977, a little movie called Star Wars came out. It wasn't called New Hope, wasn't called Episode 4, it was just Star Wars. And nobody really knew what it was, amazingly, and it had a huge impact. So that's George Lucas. He is filming a movie here called American Graffiti. And American Graffiti was made in 1973, it was set in 1963, and it's all about Lucas's youth, racing cars and whatnot. And you see this fascination with car racing in the pod racing sequences in later movies, and in all the dogfights in space. He's really into speed and cars. And Lucas went to school at USC here in California. He's a California lad. And he made a really interesting movie in grad school. And then he remade it. It's called THX 1138. It's a science fiction movie, very odd. That's where the THX brand comes from too. And it was a really good movie, so they let him make this movie, American Graffiti. It was fairly low budget for a studio, and it was a gigantic hit. And at one point, it was the movie that had made the most money with the smallest budget in Hollywood land in terms of numbers. So he'd made a big hit, and then he went to the executives and he said, hey, I would like to make this thing called Star Wars. And they had no idea what he was talking about, by all accounts. Nobody could follow what he was saying because he wanted to, we wanted to do a modern Flash Gordon, and people didn't know what that was sometimes. There's the American Graffiti poster. It had all kinds of people. Sorry, I'm looping back. Richard Dreyfuss, who's in Jaws, Ron Howard, Happy Days, Cindy Williams, Laverne and Shirley, Suzanne Summers, Three's Company. And a guy called Harrison Ford had a small role in this. And Mark Hamill, I think, actually auditioned for American Graffiti, and that led to an audition to Star Wars. So here's a little bit of a close-up of a script, and you will notice it says The Adventures of Luke, Star Killer, as taken from the Journal of the Whills. So Star Wars went through a lot of changes, and originally it was very, very different. It was actually had many, many incarnations, and many different protagonists too. So Luke wasn't the original protagonist. The original protagonist was called Anakin Skywalker, but it's not the Anakin Starkiller as well, but not the Anakin we know. It was all different. So the names all moved around. So here's our Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is the main character. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the old grizzled general. There's Jedis. May the Force be with you. Darth Vader's a Sith Lord. We know all this. Han Solo is handsome, of course. And the backwater planet where a lot of things kick off is Tatooine. However, in a different version, there you see Anakin is spelt differently. And the old grizzled general who actually trains him is named Luke Skywalker. And we see Luke Skywalker as an old grizzled guy in The Last Jedi, so kind of interesting. The Jedi were called the Jedi Bendu, and their phrase was, "May the force of others be with you." Darth Vader was a bounty hunter, a minor character. Han Solo is green and has gills, which is interesting because in The Mandalorian, in the very first episode, the Mandalorian captures a guy who's sort of greenish and has gills. So I'm wondering if that's a shout out. And finally, unbelievably, the Backwater planet is not called Tatooine. I kid you not, it's called Gordon. I have no idea what's going on there, but that's the way it was until it wasn't. And who are the Wills? Here's another close-up of a script. So we see it's now Luke Skywalker's adventure. And it's taken from the Journal of the Wills. So the idea of the Wills was that they were this mysterious cosmic race that nobody in the Star Wars universe or any of the galaxies even knew existed. They were so mysterious. And they were watching everything in the galaxy. And they were recording it. And you know, for posterity, because they're these great cosmic beings. And that's why the Star Wars movies, at least the Star Wars saga movies with the Skywalkers in, always begin with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's like a fairy tale from the Journal of the Wills. And there were supposed to be many, many, many galaxies and many fairy tales. But Lucas kind of dropped the idea. And it comes back much later in Rogue One. Donnie Yen is a Will guardian, and he's sort of force sensitive. If you haven't seen Rogue One, you got to see Rogue One. It's amazing. And Donnie Yen is amazing. So he's blind and he can do all this amazing fighting. And The Mandalorian has made some hints about the Wills and the connection to The Mandalorian. So we'll see. So we just see that like 40 years, almost 50 years apart, the Wills have vanished and then come back. And Lucas is always bringing things back from the past. And now the people who've taken over from him are also often refashioning things from the past, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to go into a little bit of the secret origin of Star Wars. It's not actually secret. It's out there in the world. But I just thought it was kind of cool because I'm a comic book fan and you got to have a secret origin somewhere, right? So these are influences on George Lucas and on Star Wars. And the first is Flash Gordon. And Flash Gordon was a newspaper strip, beautifully illustrated by Alex Raymond. It became a series of serials. And so you see Chapter 5, The Destroying Ray. What would happen is you go on a Saturday morning and you see a cartoon and a serial episode and a movie. It was like a show. It's the way it was in the days before TV. And so each serial episode would end with this amazing cliffhanger. And many, many years later, Lucas and Spielberg made Indiana Jones, which is modeled after this idea of constant cliffhangers. Anyway, I think Lucas wanted to do Flash Gordon, but he couldn't get the rights. So here's a little taste of Flash Gordon. See if it looks familiar to you. A little bit. Yes. It's a title crawl, just like in the first Star Wars. Only this one narrates it, just in case you can't read that fast, because there were probably small children in the audience. Anyway, so Flash Gordon's all a crazy good, amazing thing. The little title over here says Flash, which is from the Freddie Mercury soundtrack, the Queen soundtrack to the weird 1980s movie. Very strange. Anyway, I've seen enough of the title crawl, but that's a little influence, right? There's a movie called The Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa, who is one of the great directors ever, and based in Japan. And The Hidden Fortress, there is a amazing, fierce, independent princess, and she's sort of kidnapped, and she's in this hidden fortress. And the guy over here is played by Mifune, who's a great actor. He's like the Harrison Ford of Japan, an amazing actor, and he's a very roguish like Han Solo. And you see, here's the princess looking super intense. You don't want to mess with her. And then here are these two guys. These two guys are interesting. See, they look a little comedic, right? Which is indeed what they are. They're the comedy relief in this movie, and they're always bickering apparently. And that is the influence on the tall, proper droid, C-3PO, and the little tiny sort of round droid. So, because one of the guys was taller than the other, and that's the influence there with plot and comedy. There's a movie called The Dam Busters, made in 1955. It's actually based on a true story. And basically there was a giant dam in Germany, And in the valley beneath the dam, there were many, many factories, and they were making tanks and bombs, and the Allies were always having to bomb factories or trying. They would fail. It was very expensive. People would die. So this one guy came up with an idea of coming from behind the dam and making a bomb that's round and skipping it like a stone. But the thing was, is the bomb had to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many times, and it had to hit the lip of the dam, which was very, very shallow. And nobody would listen to him at first. He went everywhere, nobody would listen to him. And then somebody took a chance, and they tried it. And you get, here's a little bit of the trailer. Looks kind of like the trench, huh? The bullets flying. There's a squadron leader. There's somebody going down in flames. Here we go again. We're going to have another run at the trench. That's the water behind the dam. You're going to see a little thing. Oh, there he goes with the bomb. There's the bomb skipping. And spoiler alert, in the trailer, I guess everyone knew the story because it was true. The dam comes down, the Death Star gets exploded. So that's where the trench warfare idea came from, where you have to get the shot in that little exhaust hole. And Luke is like, well, I know how to do that, you know? And that's kind of a similar thing. And actually, there's videos online that compare shot for shot the sequence of Star Wars A New Hope in the trench in the Death Star and Dam Busters. And it's really fascinating because it's really very closely modeled on Dam Busters, Star Wars is. That's called homage. You know, when you're a filmmaker, but you're referring to another film, you often sort of use your influences and you make a new thing. That's the important thing. Star Wars was like nothing else. I was 10 when it came out, and it was like nothing else you'd ever seen in 1977. So another influence is Dr. Doom from Marvel Comics, who has a horribly scarred face, wears a suit of armor and a cape. He actually does magic as well as science, just like Darth Vader. And he's kind of freaky and spooky. And it's definitely kind of this big clanking robed sorcerer scientist definitely is an influence on Vader. And Dr. Doom was created by Jack Kirby, who is the visual guy at Marvel and story guy, and Stan Lee, of course. Here's an interesting little thing. The Fantastic Four go into a room and then bam, there's Doom with a really tasty looking banquet there. So I might recall something that's from another movie. Oh, I'm sorry. Right now, when you switch your family, get 4 lines of... We'll mute that for a second. Anyway, I always thought this was cool because I happened to have read that Fantastic Four story when I was a kid. And this looked very familiar to me. That'll keep the Empire out of here forever. Doom and Vader. I wonder what's on the table. What is Vader eating?
We would be honored if you would join us.
That's right.
I had no choice. They arrived right before you did. I'm sorry.
Oh dear. Those are heroes.
I'm sorry, is it?
Poor Chewie. Anyway, sticking with the subject of Jack Kirby co-created the Marvel Universe with Stan Lee. And Stan had everyone try to draw like Jack. He was very dynamic, and he was an amazing idea man. In a 1-year period in the Fantastic Four, he co-created the Inhumans, the Black Panther in Wakanda, the Silver Surfer and Galactus, and more. And he was an idea machine. He was amazing. And eventually he decided to go over to DC. He'd worked there way, way back in the day. But he decided to go and do his thing at DC because they were going to give him a little more autonomy. So he created these linked books. Everyone calls the Fourth World, but he didn't call it the Fourth World. So the idea is that there's Ragnarok and the gods all die, and then there's new gods, and they're around us today. And what you see on the cover is Orion, who's kind of like a Luke Skywalker character, and Darkseid, who's the villain, who's a little Vader-y. There's this thing called the Source, just like the Force, and it's around everybody and everything. And it actually communicates with Highfather, who I was going to show first. He's the guy with the staff. We'll see him in a second. He's like Ben Kenobi. He's like the general, but he's peaceful and he's cool. And if you notice the handwriting on the wall, this is the Source communicating. it looks a little bit like the finger we all see on our screens. It's kind of interesting. Kirby actually had a lot of really weird prophetic flourishes in his stories. He was so imaginative. He hit on a lot of stuff which actually sort of came true to pass. It's not like he predicted it. He's just an artist making stuff up. There's Highfather, and there's Dark Side, and they're locked in an eternal battle. New Genesis is this beautiful planet where Orion lives, and Orion is sort of like the ward of Highfather, just like Ben Kenobi is sort of Luke's ward for Luke is Ben Kenobi's ward for a while. He's taken care of by the older teacher character, and we don't really know what the connection is to Orion. Why is Orion there? Orion also has anger issues, which sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? There's Apocalypse, where Darkseid reigns. It's a planet which is entirely mechanized, just like the Death Star. I often think it looks like the Death Star with those weird pits. And here's Orion, kind of doing a dark side of the Force thing. He has anger issues. And what happens ultimately is it turns out that he's actually Darkseid's son. Darkseid says, "I am your father." And a long time ago, Highfather and Darkseid switched infant sons in order to keep the peace and stop the universe from being destroyed by their stupid wars. And Orion grew up thinking he was from New Genesis, but he wasn't. He was actually from Apocalypse. And here he is using this weird thing called a mother box, which is also a little prophetic because it looks, all the new gods have it. It's a living artificial intelligence computer that can tell you anything and do many amazing things, which is a lot like a smartphone, I always think. And it also communicates with pings, as you can see, which is a little like R2-D2. So I'm not saying Lucas definitely molded it on these things, but it's kind of interesting, the parallels, yeah? And of course, Orion has these anger issues. He has to use this machine to sort of hide his angry face sometimes. And that is definitely a call out to Luke when he sees this vision in The Empire Strikes Back. Like, look at who's inside Darth Vader. It's me. It could be me. So lesson is anger management, folks. So, from Bomb to the Bomb, how Star Wars was saved in the edit. Now, no one, like I said, no one had ever seen anything like Star Wars before, to the point where when George Lucas said, "Can I have the toy licensing to the executives at the movie company in 1975? They said, "Oh yeah, whatever, man." Because like nobody had made a lot of money off of toy merchandising on movies. You know, there was the Batmobile for the Batmobile show, but no one had ever seen anything like what was going to happen with Star Wars toys. And actually, Lucas made more money on toys because he got the rights to the toys than he did on the films. And he made a lot of money on the films, as we know. Money's not important, but popularity is, and everyone loved it. So Lucas brings a bunch of people to have a look at a rough cut or an assembly cut of Star Wars, which he's filmed in England and Tunisia, and he's come back and he's assembled things. None of the special effects are there. They actually had to invent a system of special effects to match Lucas's vision because it was so complicated. No one had ever done anything like the dog fights with the spaceships before. And they literally, a guy named John Dykstra and Lucas had to figure out how to do this. And they used computers for the first time in a sophisticated way, but these were 1976 computers, so a lot different. But anyway, so the screening happens. He's got two friends there, well, at least two friends there. One of them is named Brian De Palma, who's a film director, and another is a guy named Steven Spielberg. He's another California boy, and Lucas knows him, and they're kind of nerdy. You know, there's a lot of like hipster people making movies in the 70s, and then here are these two kind of kids who grew up on comic books who bonded. So Brian De Palma hates the movie. He says, "It's incoherent, it's awful." And Spielberg gets it, because Spielberg grew up looking at comics. It was incoherent. It's saved in the edit, which I'm going to talk about in a little while. But I wanted to show, like Luke, for example. They cut away from Darth Vader and Leia in the ship above Tatooine. That whole sequence is wonderful, which starts the movie. They kept breaking it up, and they cut to Luke. Oh well, here's an example.
Somewhere in space, this may
the
all be
original
happening
teaser.
right now. 20th Century Fox and
Doesn't have the
George
logo,
Lucas,
doesn't have the
the man
music.
who brought you American Graffiti, now bring you an adventure unlike anything on your planet. Star Wars.
Here they come.
space saga of rebellion and romance.
Boy, a girl in a universe. So that's the sort of teaser of Star Wars. And again, the people who were marketing it didn't really know what they had. It wasn't finished. So the teaser is a bit sparse. It goes on from there, but it's got that weird thing of this voice telling you things. So anyway, this is when you first see Luke in the original cut that Spielberg saw. He's wearing this goofy hat, and he's not really doing anything. And then they cut back to the ship with Vader and Princess Leia and the raid that's happening. You know, it's before R2 and 3PO have escaped at that point, or during the whole thing. And then they cut up to the planet, and then they cut back to Luke wandering around and hanging out with his buddies, right? And it didn't work. It broke the flow of the movie, and it made it really choppy. And Brian De Palma, that's why he said it doesn't make sense, because it's all of these stories happening at once. So Marcia Lucas, the editor, and at that time Lucas's wife, actually got rid of those things. So for the first time you see Luke, it's that beautiful shot where the sun is setting and they're about to buy the droids, and his aunt calls out to him and says, "Luke," and he runs, and that's the first shot. The first time we see Luke, and it's a beautiful introduction to him, but that's not the way it was shot. It was shot with all these other scenes, and they didn't work. And that's what happens in movies. You shoot stuff and you think it makes sense in the script, and you shoot it, and then you look at it in the edit and it doesn't work. And the editor works with the director to recraft the story. It's a way of rewriting the story in the edit. If you have enough material, it happens a lot. It's really transformative. So yeah, here's another thing about Marcia Lucas. People say she saved Star Wars. In the original scripts, okay, so the big part of the end of Star Wars is the rebels find the Death Star and they go to the Death Star and they have to get that shot right in the exhaust vent. But and meanwhile, the Death Star is creeping around the side of the moon, and it's going to blow up the rebel base, or the rebel moon, or whatever. It's creeping around the planet because it's a big thing. It moves very slowly. So there's this tension. Oh my God, are they going to destroy the Death Star before the Death Star destroys them? That wasn't in the script, and they didn't shoot it. As it was in the first assembly, the two squadron leaders try their runs on the trench in the Death Star. They fail. Luke tries, he fails, and Luke tries again, and he uses the Force and he wins, and that's it. That's the ending, which is very amazing with the spaceships, but it lacks a lot of tension. So Marcia Lucas came up with this idea, well, what if the Death Star is actually right by the rebel base? But they'd shot the whole movie. They couldn't reshoot it. And I'm not even sure if they did it that much in those days. Nowadays, it's common to plan reshoots on big movies to pick up things you didn't get. But back then, not so much. So I'm going to show you a little thing here. You'll notice that there's all these graphics of the Death Star. They added them because they didn't have, they could add graphics and special effects, but they reused shots from all over the movie to make it seem like Tarkin is watching the rebel base. In fact, this is Tarkin watching Alderaan being destroyed, and all the shots of the Death Star, gearing up to destroy the rebel base, they're actually from before when they destroyed Alderaan. They're alternate takes of everything. Even in the rebel base, you'll see Leia looking at someone, and that's from another shot because nothing existed. This sequence with the Death Star approaching didn't exist, but you see how effective it is and how simple it is. And also they use dialogue off camera to explain things because they couldn't shoot people saying things. So check it out. It's very short, but it's, oops. I'm going to have to go backwards slightly, excuse me, I think. And then we're going to present. Okay, here we go. See, Tarkin's away from the camera. He's probably saying the same thing in the other sequence. Anyway, so there's more of this, but I just wanted to show that little bit. That's what you call saving a movie in an edit. And it makes it so tense and so amazing. And that's what the value of a good collaborator, a good editor, to say, hey, these shots of Luke, they don't work. We need a little bit more attention in the end. And, the rest, as they say, is history. Here is the 1977 trailer, which is a bit more specific. They've got the Star Wars music. They don't have the logo, but you can tell the marketing people are getting a bit more. So it's a bit more it's much more like Star Wars. It's kind of rapid. The other one was very strange and slow and kind of weird because they didn't know what they had.
20th Century Fox and George Lucas bring you an adventure unlike anything on your planet. Star Wars.
Anyway, so you can see they're gradually edging towards promoting it properly. And again, people at the studio, they weren't really fans of this. They didn't get it, even before it was released. So on May the 4th, 1977, Star Wars comes out, and it has a good opening weekend on 43 screens, which even back then wasn't much because they didn't have any faith in it. They didn't know what it was. And I remember I'd seen those trailers when I was 10. I was going to school in England and my parents were in America. And I came back for a holiday, saw some movie I didn't remember, saw this trailer, was like, oh my God, what is this? It's like Jack Kirby comics come to life. My hair stood on end when I saw it. So I had to wait 3 or 4 months till I came back in spring to see this movie. And meanwhile, I was looking in the papers and seeing that the movie had come out. Now, it wasn't a hit. It did well. It actually closed after 2 weeks at Grauman's in Hollywood because Grauman's is a big thing and it had to always be the big event movie. So they were like, well, we're going to get another event movie. So it left after 2 weeks, but word of mouth spread. Look at those people waving. And word of mouth is when you go see a movie and then you go to your friends and family and go, oh my God, this movie's so cool, you got to see it. And that to this day, that helps a movie. And that's why they know if a movie's going to bomb on a Friday because of the numbers, because they know people aren't telling other people to go see this movie. It's like the human factor is really necessary. So Star Wars comes back to Grauman's, as we can see. The studio releases it on 1,700 screens. It's a gigantic hit. It's like nothing anyone has ever seen before. Lines around the block. I'm seeing this in newspapers in England and going, when am I going to see this movie? And of course, eventually I did with my brother. And we saw it like 3 times in a weekend. It was amazing. And again, there was cartoons. Visually, nothing was like this. It was just a spectacle. Even the old version, because George Lucas kind of made the effects look more up to date. But if you look at the original version, it looks so clunky compared to now, but it's incredible. Like I said, they had to develop their own computer-based system to do special effects. So it's a giant, giant success, and it leads to everything that came after it over 40 years. So it's very exciting, May the 4th Day. It's part of our culture. And it's also part of global culture, because it's not just an American thing. People have Star Wars all over the world. So the expanded universe begins. I bought this book when I was 12. It's a sequel, but it was planned. Lucas again, the studio didn't have any faith in Star Wars. Lucas thought, well, it'll probably do well, but not well enough to get the money that I had to make Star Wars. So I'll commission someone to do a cheap sequel book where we could shoot the sequel cheaply. So Han Solo isn't in this book because Harrison Ford didn't have a contract for a sequel at the time. It's all in one place, like in a jungle. They're looking for this thing called a part of the Kyber crystal, which turns up decades later on Jeddah in Rogue One. And it's how they make the Death Star lasers, how they make lightsabers. So here's this sort of semi-sequel that comes out. And it starts a whole bunch of things. Like eventually there's more books and comics. And here's the Marvel comics. They did original Star Wars movies. And you can see there's a rabbit, a green rabbit named Jackson. And I don't remember these comics. So Jackson, they were very, very popular. So maybe Jackson the rabbit dude is cool. You see in the middle a book that came much later based on the game, The Force Unleashed. There was a whole series of novels. You see there's a Darth Bane trilogy. Darth Bane is one of the great Sith Lords. I think he's the one that creates the rule of 2. And so this goes on for forever. You even have books with with Jason Solo and a different version of Ben Skywalker, because everyone has kids, and there's this whole world of novels. And then in 2014, Disney buys Lucasfilm, and they create a brain trust of Star Wars fans and writers, and they decide that they can't keep all of the books. The books are now the expanded universe books are considered imaginary stories, because they don't want to be tied down by those things. Like they killed off Chewbacca, and they're like, well, we can't have a return of Star Wars without Chewbacca. So they made all of these new books, and the new books are actually in canon, as they call it. A canon in terms of art is like the official versions. So here's a story about Qui-Gon and Anakin, which is official. It officially happened. There's one with Darth Vader and the Emperor. There's a Phasma book. There are books set before Rogue One that tell the story of what happened to those characters before. There's a story set on Canto Bight. There's Poe Dameron stories. There's all kinds of stories, and there's also comics. And we have some of the old extended universe books still. They still circulate, very popular. We have a lot of the new ones too. If you see something we don't have, drop us a line, and we'll try to bring it in. Also, Marvel finally got the comics back after 30 years, because of course Marvel and Star Wars and Disney are all, Disney owns Marvel and Star Wars now. So there's a Lando series. These comics are really well written and very popular. Dr. Aphra is a kind of an Indiana Jones archaeologist. She's a little bit of a Han Solo. She's a bit of a rogue. She winds up working for Darth Vader, which really doesn't work out. But this series is super popular. And there's rumors they may be a Dr. Aphra TV show, because of course these Dr. Aphra stories happened. They're in the canon. There's the Kylo Ren has a story. You see like Snoke before he was Snoke, and there's probably room for more Kylo Ren stories. And we have the Lando book. We have Dr. Aphra book. We're going to get more. When you look in our catalog, it's a little hard to differentiate between the old books and the new books, but we are working on a way of differentiating them. So if you want to read the old books, you can click a link and you can only see the older books. And if you want to only read the new stuff, the new canon, you can do that too. So that concludes our Star Wars class for the day. There's a lot of stuff I didn't mention. I didn't mention the toys. Yeah, the toys. Again, the studio had no confidence in this. They'd given the toy license to Lucas, but the toy companies didn't know what was going on either. And then it's this big hit, and so Kenner or Mattel, they start doing the toys, but it takes like 8 months. They came out in Christmas of 1977. It's 8 months. I was a kid waiting. My brother and I were waiting. You got these vouchers, which were like pictures of the toys, which it's not quite coal in your stocking, but it's not the same as a toy. But eventually they came out, and boom, they were so cool. They look a little old school now when you see the new figures, but they're cool. Anyway, we might do another one of these. Maybe we'll do one about Empire or the new ones. You can write to us and let us know. Like I said, go to our catalog, check out our Star Wars resources. We also have ebooks. So check those out, because we've got Star Wars items there too. We've got the DVDs. I wanted to talk about the Clone Wars and Rebels and all the weird stuff with Force Witches and Darth Maul and all this amazing magical stuff. It's endless. We'd be here forever, and I have to get lunch now, so we have to end somewhere. So thank you for coming to May the 4th be with you Star Wars class, and hopefully we'll do more, and hopefully we'll see you soon at the library. Eventually we'll be reopening, and we'll be seeing you. But until then, do the ebooks, check those things out. Let us know what you want. Send us emails, and we'll bring those things in if we can. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a good day.